section 18, we're going to install the cooling system. And what's unique about the Rotoway helicopter, its cooling system is liquid cooled. And if you have liquid cooling, you need a water pump. Well, your Talon helicopter features an electric water pump that's controlled by the ECUs. So we're going to begin by installing the radiator and shroud, the surge tank, and the sump. Then we're going to route all the hoses for the coolant and the oil lines. So let's get started.
Refer to the construction manual, section 18, for components and prints. The radiator, fan shroud, and shroud ring as received from Rotoway. Sand the shroud and ring to remove any excess resin as necessary. Be sure and sand the inside diameter of the ring. Install the two drain plugs in the bottom front of the radiator. Use Teflon tape or a pipe sealant on the pipe threads. Cover the other ports with tape to prevent any contamination. Place the radiator on a small box at least 10 inches high with the ports face up. Make a template by cutting a piece of cardboard to fit the shroud. Measure and lay out the 7 holes for the mounting bolts and hose connections. Make 1/8 inch pilot holes in the template. Lay the shroud next to the radiator and flip the template over and into the shroud. Transfer the holes to the shroud and recheck the layout. Start small and recheck for a good fit. The finished hole sizes are 1 5/8 inches for the inlet and outlet hose ports, 17/64 of an inch for the 4 mount bolts, and 1 1/8 inch for the air bleed valve. Be sure the fiberglass openings clear the welds around the 3 ports. Check the shroud. Make sure it does not interfere with the 2 forward airframe mounts on the radiator. File or grind away the shroud to improve the fit. Install the supplied foam gasket material around the edge of the radiator as shown. Secure the shroud to the radiator with the 4 bolts and fender washers. Do not remove the protective cardboard flats at this time. The secondary must be in its final position before you can fit the radiator and shroud. The tail rotor drive pulley must be removed to fit the fan and shroud. Install the high temp fan on the secondary shaft with the snap ring on the end of the shaft. Install the radiator and shroud on the front mounts. Be sure to use the 2 spacers between the front airframe bracket and radiator mounts. Raise the shroud and slide the fan up the shaft until the shroud is parallel with the fan. Use safety wire to tie off the rear part of the radiator. At this time, fabricate the 2 rear brackets. The bracket will need a twist of approximately 90 degrees to fit the airframe. Locate and drill the holes for the strap mounts. Use a drill right jig to drill the holes in the tubing. Use the forward tail boom brackets bolts to secure the straps to the airframe. With the brackets installed, select one blade of the fan and use it as a guide and scribe a line 360 degrees for the fan opening. Remove the radiator from the airframe and put it on the box. Place the ring on the shroud and concentric to the scribe line. Tape in place. Now scribe the inside diameter of the ring onto the top of the shroud. This will be the fan opening line you will need to cut. Cut just outside the line. Sand the edges. Place the ring on the shroud and verify the fit. Reinstall the radiator and shroud with ring. The top of the fan should be flush with the top of the ring. Place the ring concentric with the fan blade and tape in place. There should be at least 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch clearance between the fan blade tips and the ring. Drill 2 cleco holes on each side to secure the ring with shroud. Remove the radiator. Remove the shroud from the radiator and finish drill 8 equally spaced rivet holes. As an option, you can drill from the inside of the shroud for better hole alignment. Index and remove the ring and thoroughly clean the mating surfaces. Place a small bead of silicone adhesive where the ring and shroud will be joined together. Secure the ring to the shroud with the supplied pop rivets and pull from the inside. Ring secured to the shroud. Install the tail rotor drive pulley and bolt in place. Use a small amount of anti-seize on the shaft. Reinstall the tail rotor drive belt. Thoroughly clean with acetone the lower secondary shaft and the bore of the fan hub. Install the high temp fan and hub bearing. The hub bearing must be secured to the shaft with Loctite 609. There are 2 set screws that also must be secured on your final install. You will need a short arm Allen wrench, about 2 1/4 inches, to tighten these screws. Install the lower fan countershaft belt. If you have an ACES engine, a separate oil cooler is installed inside the shroud. The oil cooler supplied can vary in the type of hose connection. In either case, follow the instructions that come with the cooler. The oil cooler is mounted in the front side of the shroud between the large hose ports. 2 holes must be cut to allow for the hose fittings. Determine the location and cut the holes. The holes must be large enough for the cooler to sit flush against the front. In this installation, O-ring adapters are used. Oil the rings before installation and thread the adapter until the face behind the O-ring just touches the mating face on the cooler. Always place a wrench on the cooler fitting to prevent damage to the cooler. Do not over-tighten. Four black wire ties and foam pads are used to secure the cooler to the radiator. Install the oil cooler. More details can be found in section 27 of the construction manuals. Install the fan and shroud. The front bolts must be safety wired. Clamp the surge tank on the airframe brackets. Locate and mark the holes. Final hole size in the airframe bracket is 3/16 of an inch. Final size the hole in the surge tank tabs at 1/4 of an inch. Install small rubber pads under the aluminum tabs on your final assembly. Use pieces of rubber strip used for the sump strap. The sump and sump strap as received from Rotorway. Fabricate the sump mounting strap. Use the dimensions in the construction manual. Locate and drill the 3/4 inch holes that secure the strap to the sump. Remember to allow for the rubber strips when determining hole location. Builder tip. Do not locate the side bolt hole until you drill the 2 bottom holes. Then locate the side hole with the rubber strip in place. Do not drill the 3/16 inch holes at this time. Glue the rubber strips to the strap using the 2-part epoxy. Use spring clamps and 50 thousandths sheet stock to hold in place. When installed, the sump must be level laterally and must be tilted so the front is 1/2 inch higher than the rear of the sump. Before drilling the 5/16 inch hole on the pilot's side, check the fit. The sump must remain clear of the fiberglass tub. To help with tub clearance, it may be necessary to create a joggle on the passenger side of the bracket as shown. Locate and drill the 5/16 inch hole in the pilot side bracket. When satisfied with the fit, locate and drill the 2 3/16 inch holes. Install the bolts. Part number E00-2320, found on E28 Card 1. The electric water pump as received from Rotorway. The bracket is mounted to these 2 studs on the pump. For the best fit, the bracket can be mounted on the outlet side or the inlet side. Note: If mounting on the outlet side, you will need to radius this bottom edge to fit the pump. There are 2 nuts supplied on the pump to secure the bracket on the inlet side. You will need to make a slight twist in the bracket for it to fit the airframe mount. Do not bend this bracket when installed on the pump. Place bracket in a vise. The water pump is secured to the airframe using the same mount bolt as the alternator strap. The coolant parts as received from Rotorway. Note: the water tees used on the pilot and passenger side are identical. Inside the tee, the smaller tube is cut at an angle to improve the flow in the desired direction. Install the pilot's side with flow going to the radiator. Install the passenger side with the flow coming from the water pump. Reference the construction manual for a cutaway view. Install the air bleed valve in the 120-degree manifold. On the passenger side, reference print E30-2000 to install the 120-degree manifold, water pump, and hoses. Cut hoses to length for the best fit. Begin by cutting the supplied hose to install the tee to the engine U-tube manifold as shown. Install a short piece of hose to the tee. Install the formed hose with a piece of fire sleeve hose. Install the 120-degree manifold. Install the pump to the hose first and tighten clamp. Then secure the bracket to the airframe as shown. Now trim and fit the short elbow between the 120-degree manifold and the pump. Note: the engine U-tube manifold can be repositioned for better alignment for the tee and water pump outlet hoses. Loosen the hoses on the engine manifold U-tube and move it slightly for improved alignment. Cut to length and install the 3/4 inch hose that runs from the surge tank to the 120-degree manifold. Use the 2 cushion loop clamps to secure the hose clear of the cog belt. Use additional 1-inch cushion loop clamps to secure the hose to the airframe. Wait to install the 3/4 inch coolant hose that runs from the tee to the sump until after the steel braided for the oil lines are installed later in this section. Route and install the overflow tubing from the surge tank to behind the radiator. On the pilot side, refer to the print and install the T and hoses. The T fits between the engine manifold outlet and the radiator. Cut to length the 3/4 inch hose that runs from the T to the fitting on the sump, as shown. Use the fire sleeve hose as necessary to protect the hoses from the exhaust headers. Use the supplied tie straps to secure the hose to the airframe. If necessary, adjust the bottom coolant hoses on the engine, from the cylinder head to the water jacket, to avoid contact with the engine mount. The oil lines and rubber hoses for the A600 engine. If you have a supercharged A600 engine, you will also install these additional oil lines and hoses. More information can be found in Section 27 of the Construction Manual. The steel-braided hoses should be covered with the supplied hose jackets. The hose jacket is located on E25 Card 4. Use part number E00-9620, 5/8 inch jacket for the 8 hoses. Install the hose jackets as shown. Cut the desired length and slide the jacket over the fittings. Be sure to blow out any debris of each line after fitting the hose jacket. The hose jacket tape is also located on E25 Card 4. After fitting the jacket, tape each end. Before installing the hose ends, you must apply a small amount of engine oil on the mating parts. These fittings are aluminum and can easily be damaged if over-tightened. The best way to secure the fitting is with AN wrenches. You can use standard wrenches, but use caution not to over-tighten. Reference the construction print E30-2000 to route the 3 steel-braided hoses. On the passenger side, be sure to route the hoses correctly. Hose E28-6142 is routed from the outlet on the oil filter mount to the fitting on the engine oil galley, passenger side. E28-6122 hose is routed from the inlet oil filter mount to the 45-degree fitting on the engine oil pump, passenger side. Use wire ties and short pieces of rubber hose as standoffs to support the hoses as necessary. Route the oil line from the rocker drain fitting to the sump fitting on the passenger side. Now route the coolant hose from the T to the fitting on the sump tank. You can use a piece of hose and split it down the side to make a doubler in the area where this hose may chafe, as it is in close proximity of other components. Wire tie the doubler in place. On the pilot side, install the 1-inch main oil drain hose from the 1-inch brass fitting on the engine to the sump with the supplied clamps. Route hose E28-6112 from the pilot side of the engine oil pump to the AN sump fitting. Fit and install the rocker drain hose on the pilot's side. If you have a supercharger, there are 2 drain hoses that are routed to the sump. Fit and install the hoses and clamps. Tie the 2 hoses together with a wire tie and a short piece of rubber. Route the AN6 hose from the inlet fitting on the supercharger to the oil cooler fitting on the passenger side. Route the short AN6 hose from the fitting on the T-fitting on the lower cover to the oil cooler fitting on the pilot's side. Reference section 27 of the construction manual for more details.